The results of apostasy and defection are put before us dramatically today. The worship of money, sex and power has replaced the true worship of God, the God who had brought the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. Child sacrifice has now been added to the list of evil doing. The author tells us that the Israelites copied the nations around about them. There's a message in that for us. New South Wales copied the other states when its parliament approved euthanasia. How often we cave in to peer pressure in the lifestyle choices that we make. It used to be called keeping up with the Joneses, and at first people tried to resist that temptation because they realised it had a kind of corrupting influence on family life. Nowadays, everybody feels compelled to keep up with the Joneses, even if that lifestyle is basically a pagan one. And parenting skills are so poor. It may not be child sacrifice, but there's child neglect. There's mothers that have to rush off to consult Dr. Google to know how to deal with their child who's having a tantrum. So much wisdom inherited from the generations has been lost. This is the way of death, not the way of life. Such a lifestyle and those choices have consequences. We see it, the author puts it this way: they pursued emptiness and themselves became empty. That's the meaning of vain, vanities, empty things. And the Lord God withdrew his protection because they withdrew from him. I mean, treating God and his laws with disdain comes at a price. The people of the northern kingdom, that's 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, were stripped of their clothing, bound to each other by ropes, and led into slavery by the Assyrians from Mesopotamia. Criticism should always be constructive. God says that we are to reform ourselves first before bashing up on others. Good advice. Husbands and wives, take note. However, the first reading shows that God does pass judgment, sometimes on entire nations, even though he tells us to be circumspect about passing judgment. Of course, that's for our own good. The temptation is to become a self-righteous critic. It's impossible to live with. But history teaches us valuable lessons, and whole nations can be lost. To be ignorant of history is to condemn ourselves to making the same mistakes as our ancestors. There's no passing of premature judgment or harsh criticism implied when we encourage our bright young millennials to study history and to become enlightened. We're just caring about their well-being, because ignorance is not bliss.